Hello and welcome into episode 182 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Bridget Prue here with Scott McLaughlin. Brian is, apparently he's too busy for us. I think he's on another date. But here we are. We have a special episode for you guys. No game recently to react to, but Scott had a one-on-one interview with Jake DeBrusk earlier today. So we want to just talk a little bit about what happened at Bruins practice, Taylor Hall potentially coming back for Thursday's game, and just exactly what Jake DeBrusk said when he talked to Scott. I thought it was really interesting. Scott, you asked him about the trade request, and he's gotten really good at answering those questions. I will say he has become really good in his answers to the media. I think I have a lot of respect for the way that he answers those kind of questions now, because they used to be really tough, and guys and him and the team kind of didn't want to respond to those kind of questions early on when it first happened. He has been much more open and honest about it now. And I think he feels really comfortable talking about it because of how much time's passed, how well his game has progressed since then. So there were a lot of really good answers. Scott, you did a good job. Ended it with something somewhat light, but also relevant. We can get into that. We'll also react to it just after the interview. But Scott, you were at practice today, and I think the main thing from practice was Taylor Hall finally out there practicing with Bertuzzi for the first time. And, we're not sure. They were kind of cryptic about it, but he could be back for Thursday.
Yeah, so he was out of the no contact jersey. He took practice reps on a regular line, on the third line with Coyle and Bertuzzi. And throughout this season, that's the sign that they're about to play in a game. When you are in a regular practice jersey and taking reps on a regular line. Oh, and by the way, he gets the center ice stretch at the end of practice. Those have been all the signs that you are about to play your first game. That is what it was with Marchand, with McAvoy, with us when he came back. It's the telltale sign that Montgomery, after practice, says he's doubtful. Says, he's still checking boxes. Hall himself said there's still some conversations to have. He's not really sure. He'll know in the morning. So it depends. Do you want to take Montgomery at his word when he says he's doubtful for Thursday? Or do you look back and remember that Montgomery intentionally lied to us about Marchand when he was ready to return? And then, the next day apologized and said, oh, I had to kind of do that. Like, I'm sorry.
As long as you apologize for it.
Yeah, we'll see. It's possible he's telling us the truth this time, but all the signs were there in practice. I mean, he wasn't held back. He took contact. Not that there's like a ton of contact in practice, obviously, but there's some bumping. They did some battle drills. My gut feeling is he's gonna Thursday hear about. People listen to this. It's Thursday morning, so maybe morning skate. We find out for sure, but my gut reaction is he's playing Thursday night.
Scott, you broke up a little bit there, but I'm just gonna say what you just said. Your gut feeling is that he's gonna play Thursday, based on what you saw in practice. Yes.
Yeah, yes. Exactly.
Okay. There's a little bit of a lag for us there. So yeah. All right, fine, Scott. I guess you're.
I feel like I'm lagging. I feel like behind.
Yes, you are. You're very far behind lag.
Heard.
Your internet is not great right now, but anyhow, I mean, I'm encouraged also by the fact that he practiced where he did. I do think that I think you don't take into consideration what Montgomery said, because it's a little bit of gamesmanship when he talks about the lineup and, he might not be ready. We had heard reports. We weren't sure how true they were. And I'm still not sure how true they were. This could be, its own separate narrative, that Hall felt like he was ready to come back. So if that was true, and he's ready to come back now, it would make sense to get him in. Next game on Thursday is against Toronto. And I think it's key to get him back before the end of the regular season just to see how that line looks with Coyle and Bertuzzi. I, for one, am excited to see it because never in my life did I think I was going to see a line that had Taylor Hall and Tyler Bertuzzi on it at the same time. So I just think it's like, it's intriguing to me how that's going to work. I think there's such like, their personalities couldn't be more different. But yet I think that they'll work together. And I think with Coyle in the middle, I think that it should work. Maybe right off the bat, maybe it'll take a few games, but I'm excited to see it. So I really do hope that Thursday is the day we get to see it for the first time.
Yeah, and it's definitely important to get some regular season games in because Hall and Bertuzzi haven't played together. Obviously, Coyle's played plenty with both of them, but separately. It's always been Trent Frederick on the right, and as I've talked about before, like that's a different dynamic if you're Charlie Coyle. He's almost always had at least one kind of bigger bodied presence who can play like puck protection game and maybe slow things down, cycle in the offensive zone, like that kind of style. And not that Hall and Bertuzzi can't do that, but they want to play, for the most part, they want to play at a little faster pace. Especially Hall wants to play off the rush, use his speed to the outside. Bertuzzi's kind of, a bit of a go player. He wants to take some chances. He isn't, like good chances. He wants to get pucks to the net. He wants to put passes into dangerous areas and isn't always, cycle. So there could be some adjustments and some getting used to that for Coyle having two wingers like that and not a Frederick or a Foligno. So yeah, if they can get a few games here down the stretch, then that's going to be pretty important.
And when Smith was good, he was a go kind of player. I know this season's been a little bit different, but like Hall's played alongside Smith, who has had a little bit of that to his game when he was on his game. I also think of Taylor Hall as a good puck protection player. Obviously, he's better when he can play off the rush, but he's got the size and he can protect the puck pretty well. I'm excited to see it as a line. I've been waiting for it ever since they brought Bertuzzi over, and it looked like that could be the formation. And not only that, it's important to see how it looks before the playoffs, because maybe if it doesn't look good, you have other options to consider. We talked about how you're going to have to bring guys out of the lineup that have earned their spots, like Trent Frederick. Where is he going to go? Nick Foligno, where is he going to go when he comes back? So you have a lot of options. This would be plan A for the third line, but you're going to get a chance to see whether or not it looks as good as you think it might. Obviously, all those guys on paper are, you could argue all those guys are not bottom six players. Like you could argue these are second line guys that you have playing on a third line. And one of the things that we'll hear in the interview with DeBrusk is how important that bottom six is in the playoffs. And that's something that this team is very aware of.
Yeah, for sure. And as far as Frederick, he was down on the fourth line at Wednesday's practice with no second Hathaway. And it's like it's gonna be a little different role for him too. Like he's done that before, so it's not like it's a totally new experience for him. But this year he's been in a little bit more of an offensive role, and we've seen him have a career year offensively. And obviously, the Bruins are going to want him to still score and contribute offensively at the fourth line. But there's also like that line has an identity as kind of a defensive, physical line. And, I do think like at times his physical game has maybe lacked a little bit. Like when that line is, playing offensively and cycling, he's not have to be as physical. In now situations where it's like, hey, that line's going to be kind of counted on, bring some energy, set the tone. So, throw an extra hit or two here and there.
Yeah. And so I guess that brings us to when the lineup's going to be fully healthy. So we're still waiting on Nick Foligno and Derek Forbort to be ready. Timeline, Scott, did you get any update on a timeline at practice today?
Nope. Foligno's still in a no contact jersey. So nothing new there. Forbort hasn't started skating yet. Montgomery said, even like on his own, he hasn't really been on the ice. He's still doing off work stuff. I did see Forbort walking around, and like he didn't have a brace on or anything. So,
Did he have a limp?
which
Did he have a
I
limp?
didn't notice a limp. I mean, I only saw him walking for, I don't know, maybe 20 feet or so. So,
I only
I
asked
wasn't.
because I broke my toe yesterday and I walked all the way to Fenway with the worst limp. And I think I looked like a
Well,
crazy person. So
yeah, I mean, I would guess that a broken toe do that.
I almost called out, but then I was like, it seems a little late to call out. And I just taped my toes together and walked all the way down. So maybe he's at a better place than I am right now. We never make it through the season without an injury.
By the way, one of the things we talked about DeBrusk, speaking of like, injuries and battling through and just taping stuff together, like he said like in the Winter Classic, they like put a splint on his finger and had it like taped up because that was the first injury, it was the very first shift, and like threw him back out there, and he said he was already on painkillers, and so like he didn't really quite feel the second injury as bad as as didn't feel it as bad as it was. He maybe didn't feel it quite right away. So
I need whatever pain meds are. Can I have some? Because I couldn't sleep last night. I need the Bruins medical staff over here real quick because my toe is not the color it's supposed to be. Sorry.
I didn't actually break it, but I once badly bruised my toe because stupidly this was when I was younger, but I was stupidly trying to hit off a pitching machine while barefoot and fouled a pitch right off my foot.
Oh, Scott.
Well, like it was like summer, so I was just like, hanging around the pool, hanging around the yard, and
7 beers
didn't really think about it until I fouled it off and was like, that was really stupid.
All right. Well, now that you've heard about our current injuries, Scott, is there anything else you wanted to go over Bruins practice-wise before DeBrusk? And like I said, we'll respond after because I did have some thoughts about some of the things he said.
Well, the last thing from practice, David Krejci was out there in a regular jersey to start, but did not finish practice. I didn't catch exactly when he left. I noticed he wasn't out there when they did power play drills, and he was not. And Germany's after that, he's still a little sore and was questionable for Thursday. So we kind of had an idea that, when he missed Sunday's game, that there was actually something semi-legitimate. Montgomery said he probably wouldn't have been able to play, even beyond just resting him. So seems like he is still dealing with like something a little bit lingering, and it's possible that he misses another game, which, that could also shake up the lines. Like, it'd be interesting to see who they put up there. So
that was going to be my next question. Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because if you want to keep that Coyle line together, like the Hall, Coyle, Bertuzzi, if Hall's back, you want to see that for an extended period of time. And, if Krejci's out, you don't have the check line. So you wonder where the center comes from to replace Krejci in that kind of a situation. And you know what? It's not, I don't hate the idea of resting Krejci if he needs rest. Like, rest him the rest of the season if that's what he needs. He's one of the guys that we thought might need rest at this point in the year anyway. So I don't see any harm in keeping him out. Only a few games left. And he's one of the guys who, we mentioned this so many times, everybody's aware, didn't have a full NHL season last year. His workload was much different last season. He got up to NHL speed, but there was always a chance that at some point in time he could feel the effects of an NHL season. So not necessarily surprising. I think kind of with him, play it safe. You already know what that check line looks like. There's not a lot of upside to keeping him in if he's not 100%.
Yeah, I agree. It does become interesting to know like who they move up. I would assume it's Zaka moves over to center and then you fill in the wing, but obviously, the two natural choices to be the wing there would be Hall and Bertuzzi. but you want those guys to play together because you only have a few games to do that. So
What about Frederick?
interesting. It could be Frederick. It could be Lauko. Like you
Where?
could still have a check line. Move Lauko up.
Yeah, true. That's
I
still
don't know.
check. They have so many checks you could throw anyone up there.
Yeah.
You throw Zaboral.
Throw Jacob Zaboral up there. Who cares?
Yeah. So that is, we got a little bit of positive injury update today with the Hall thing. The only thing I wonder is about Forbort, if he's not skating yet, what that timeline really is. Foligno is obviously much closer to coming back than Forbort, but obviously if we get that update, we will let you know. Scott, in the past when we've seen people that haven't yet practiced, how long does it usually take for them to come back? I feel like it's been.
I mean, we don't know. Like until they're actually on the ice, we just don't. What we do know is, Montgomery fasting. He's not back playoffs, so I feel like it might not even be game one. Like I could see that being something towards the middle of the first round. So, but yeah, I definitely don't expect him in the regular season.
No, I don't either. I'm wondering about the first round really at this point. So it's concerning, but it's not in that you have other really good penalty killing defensemen. Like we mentioned last episode about Brendan Carlo. You also traded for Orlov at the deadline. So you added that depth for, your top 6 defensemen. You also have Zaboral that you've been working in. So it's one season, Scott, and I can't remember another season in recent time like this where you have a defenseman down and you're not going, oh my God, who are they going to put in there? Like they have options to put in there right now.
Yeah, and that the whole point of the Orlov trade, it was the whole point of kind of defending, whether it was Grizzly, Riley, Forbort, Zaboral, where we're like, oh, they're gonna have to trade away a defenseman at some point. Now, like this is why they never did, because it's cost them in the past when they haven't had enough bodies, and now, like even now you're kind of seeing that it's like they're one injury. If Forbort isn't back in the first round, they're one injury from going to a
Damn it, Scott, your freaking internet. Your internet is bad. Okay. So I think what you're trying to say, Scott, even though you're breaking up, is that you still have one more injury you could take on the back end before you're thinking about dipping into Providence.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they stacked all these defensemen. Like going into the year early in the season, we're thinking, oh, they're gonna have to trade a defenseman at some point, right? Like once McAvoy comes back, they have too many. There's Forbort and Riley and Grizzly, and they signed Anton Strawman and Jacob Zaboral's here. And it's like, nope, this is why they didn't trade any of them. This is why they then traded for Dmitry Orlov on top of all that. Like they've been burned in the past when they haven't had enough NHL caliber defensemen. And even still, like they're still until Forbort comes back, they're one injury away from Zaboral or potentially like a Riley getting called up. From someone who hasn't been a regular. So it can happen fast. Like it's still, 2 or 3 injuries on the back end, and you're like, oh boy, like I don't know about that bottom pairing. Someone's playing in the top 4 that, I don't really know if they should be playing those minutes. So the good news for the Bruins, they're deeper than anyone else on defense. Like whatever problems they might have with a couple injuries, other teams are even thinner. So they're still in a really good spot. And obviously with Forbort out, they still have 6 really good defensemen playing. You hope that when he comes back, everyone else is still healthy, and then you do have easily the deepest D core going.
Yeah, exactly. My thought is that like you're way better off than most other teams in terms of like I know Zaboral hasn't played a lot, but I think he's serviceable. And in a playoff series, you're like, we've seen what it looks like when he's in, and they're winning games without, Bergeron, Krejci, whatnot, and they have Zaboral in the lineup. They have that. The next guy up is really not that huge of a drop off. He's not a top 6 guy, but he's not such a big drop off that you're wondering, is he a liability? Obviously, it also depends. Is the guy that gets injured McAvoy? That's a huge difference. But without further ado, we should get to Scott's one-on-one with Jake DeBrusk. So let me throw it to that. This is what Jake DeBrusk had to say today.
All right, I'm here with Jake DeBrusk on the Skate Podcast. Jake, I want to start. You guys had a little bit of a kids cheering section out there for practice today. What was that like?
Yeah, no, that was kind of cool. I think Paso went and stretched over there, and they started cheering his name for practice. They gave a wave, and just shows the support that we always get. I mean, it's one of those things where sometimes it's a normal crowd where people come and watch us practice, but then there's other times where you get a school or something like that, and it brings a little more energy, I would say.
Going into these last 5 regular season games, getting ready for the playoffs, just kind of, what's your mindset at? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think it's more so just kind of getting the game in order and, trying to win games. Obviously, we're solidified where we're going to be, but want to have that good feeling going into it. And it's one of those things that feeling pretty decent. I think the schedule's been pretty hard on everybody, but, it's one of those things where I try to take care of myself as best as possible. Got some big games against some good teams, so it should bring the best out in us. And it's one of those things where personally I'm just trying to kind of get back. I think I've hit a little bit of a wall in a sense, coming back from an injury probably about a couple weeks ago, and then it's been kind of up and down since. So I'm trying to look for just consistency here in the last 5 games.
Is that kind of like a physical wall?
I think it's also, I think maybe a little bit, but I think it's also just 82 games. You're going to hit one eventually, and even though I missed around, I don't even know, maybe 20 games or just under that, I think it was. But even with that, technically rest time, you're still working out every day. You're still going on the ice, training hard to get back a game shape. So it's one of those things that I think actually physically my body's handling it pretty well. It's more so just actually the mental fatigue side of things, where I think it's just with every game, it seems like there's a game the next day or back-to-back, and just trying to stay in the moment's kind of been the biggest challenge. I think for everybody in the league. I think every guy that's had the schedules that we've had, or every team's going through it. So it's one of those things that at least you're not the only team. It's just a matter of trying to put together wins.
Even with that, that wall or whatever, your production since coming back has still been pretty good. What was your mindset when that injury happened? Because you're having a career year, you just have the high moment at the Winter Classic. It feels like that could have really kind of taken things off the rails and sidetracked you, but how did you kind of make sure that didn't happen?
Yeah, I think honestly what you were saying, I think it was an unreal start for me and our team as well, obviously. I think it was one of those things where you never like getting injured, but getting injured on a high of Winter Classic was a different type of feeling. It just makes you want to get back there even more. It makes you want to feel that emotion that it's hard to feel unless you're in a big game or a special event like that. It's more like playoff vibe, I would say. But it reminded me of when I scored against Toronto, and I haven't felt that in a while. So it was one of those things that I milked that out for as long as I could. I couldn't really move for the first 2 weeks, so I think I even said it earlier, but I couldn't really do anything. So I was just watching the boys play and seeing them win and have success, and even the games where it was tight or where I probably didn't even lose, but those games you want to be there even more. When it's one of those tight games, you want to be a difference maker. And I think I took my preparation very seriously coming into this season, and I kind of understand my body now. I just want to make sure my speed was there. That was the biggest thing I didn't know. Obviously, it was my first big leg injury or bone, I guess. So thankfully, I didn't know what that was like. That's why I kept playing. But it's one of those things that I'm very thankful that I did, and very thankful of how the training staff in here has treated me. Obviously, from the weight room to the the trainers, it's been. I was the only guy injured, so they had all hands on deck, and it was one of those things where they didn't want to rush me back. We didn't need to get rushed, but at the same time, they wanted to make sure I was ready to go, and I thought that it showed my first couple of games. Obviously, I think in my career, coming back from injury, I'm always pretty excited, and I usually get one or two pretty quickly, but I think my game's starting to kind of come back around to that.
Obviously, you did finish that game, and then you find out it's broken. I know people say fibula non-weight bearing, but I mean, were you surprised to find out it was that serious? Or?
Yeah, well, I didn't. I actually hurt my hand, so I hurt this guy right here in the first shift of the game. So I was already on some pain meds, to be honest with you. and some pretty good ones because I couldn't close my hand. So, I had a wrap and I had a splint and everything. They did a great job again of making sure they knew I wasn't coming out. So it was one of those things where I was already kind of just starting to feel the effects from that. It takes a little bit. But at the same time, I knew it was pretty bad. I knew it was bad. And like you said, it's not weight bearing, whatever percentage it is, but going out there and skating on it, when I remember what it feels like, it was. It just kept getting worse. It wasn't getting any better. So I knew it wasn't a stinger. And there was one shift. I think it was Kretsch got the puck in the neutral zone. I think it was maybe the shift where I scored, where he was flying up the ice and I couldn't catch him. That's when I knew I was in trouble. I said that after the game, but it was true. That's literally when I was like, yeah, this is serious. And then the X-ray machine after was. We didn't really even need to go in there. I knew it was pretty messed up. So didn't actually was more concerned about my hand, but then once that came back, with MRIs and everything, and see how actual serious it was close. It was closer, so it was good bouncing away. Didn't need surgery.
You referenced, the high of big goals, and I'm assuming that was Toronto playoffs you're talking about. You've had some of those big playoff games. I'm thinking Carolina in the bubble as well, 2-goal game. How do you kind of see yourself this time of year as, obviously you want to be a playoff performer and you're on the top line, like just kind of how do you approach this time of year?
Yeah, I think it's, obviously it's been a lot of talk, especially for us in Bruins Circle, not necessarily on the team, but outside, I would say, because we've had the playoffs locked in for a month and a half, so what else are you going to talk about, I guess, right? Besides the games going on, but, it's one of those things that I find it's going to be, it's going to take everybody in this room. It's one of those things where in all those games I was put in positions where the game was tied or, it was comebacks or different things. So you need a full group to get in those spots. Everyone wants to be a clutch player. Everybody wants to have those goals. Trust me, they're the best. But it's one of those things that you need a lot of things to go right and you need a lot of things to kind of fall into place for those to happen. But I'm excited. Obviously, yes, we switch up our line sometimes here and there, but our line hasn't really clicked in a little bit as we did at the beginning of the year. I thought we were kind of firing all cylinders at the start, and now it's kind of, our matchups are, for some reason just tighter. It feels like it's this time of year, so it's not necessarily as open, but, usually the top two lines cancel each other out, and then it's the third and fourth lines that win you the series. That's one thing I was told when I was younger, and but at the same time, I'd love to be, a consistent contributor. That's kind of what my role is. Obviously, if I don't have any success, it's going to hurt our team.
Just what you mentioned, the importance of third, fourth lines, depth. What is it like when you look down the lineup and you see like Taylor Hall getting back out there for a regular practice today, and it's a third line of him, Charlie Coyle, and Tyler Bertuzzi. Guys who could easily be playing in the top six. Yeah,
it's one of those things where it's exciting. It's one of those. It's good to see him back out there, even Flingy, and Forbort was coming back. We got so many bodies for that reason, for depth, for if things were to go wrong. And like you said, that line is going to be huge for us in the playoffs. Obviously, every line is, but it's going to be everybody's turn. But that's, like you said, it's a top six line on most teams, and at the same time, it pushes us in the top six to play like top six, or else our ice time will be gone. So it's not necessarily intimidating, but at the same time, you got to be sharp and make sure I can do anything I can to stay with those two guys.
I think at this time last year, you were up on the top line. Your play had definitely picked up, but there were still the questions of what's the future. There's still trade requests out there. Like, just how much better do you feel this year at this time? Kind of a year removed from all that.
Oh yeah, no, it's completely different. Even from the start of the season, I felt like it was. Not necessarily a fresh start, but a clean slate. And, obviously I love the way that I finished last year. I had lots of help in this room. Didn't like how we finished the year, obviously, and left the bitter taste in my mouth and wanted to run it back. And obviously having Berge come back and Kretsch and, different things, it was an easy decision. I've always loved the city here, and the fans are amazing. And I've always been treated well, even though I threw, a curveball last year or, whatever you want to say, but which I totally understand. But at some point it was, you don't necessarily know your future as a hockey player. There's very select few guys that have no trade clauses, just in general, so it's one of those things that you never really know, but just having that all kind of not dealt with is, or dealt with, I guess, is definitely a big pro, and maybe focus on the year and, my preparation this summer.
I think it's easy to point to like a coaching change. People point to that when they talk about you having a better season, but as I said, it did start last year. You did finish strong. What did it take to kind of get back on track for you?
Yeah, I think honestly there was a lot of it takes a lot of things to get out of that. You know, I think it's one of those things where, weirdly enough, I think I put myself back against the wall and realized I had to play, you know, a certain type of way. And you know, it was one of those things where it wasn't necessarily with Marshy and Bergie for, you know, right away after that. It took a little bit of time, but obviously we had some different, you know, line changes, different things going on. But those guys helped me out a ton. They pretty much redeemed my career and maybe found the joy in the game again. And it's one of those things that, you know, Marshy's pretty hard on me, but it's one of those things where they pushed me to get to, you know, just be better. And anytime that, you know, someone's trying to help you, it's dumb not to listen. So that's what I tell AJ anyway. He's sitting beside me, and I give him advice. But it's one of those things that I think there's a lot of different things. Like I was saying earlier, you know, Gretchen and Bree coming back, but obviously, you know, I was excited to meet Monty. I was excited to see what he could do for this team, and you know, obviously going in a different direction there has only worked out great things for us, and I think for him too, it's worked out well in Vegas. You know, he's a good coach, but it's one of those things where I came in with a different mindset this year.
What has Jim Montgomery done to help you?
I think he's helped all of us. I think if you look around the room, there's probably you know, 6 or 7 guys around their career highs. Anytime you have that means everyone's buying in, and that means that everyone's listening to his message and playing for each other, and that's what every coach would want. And it's one of those things that I think he's really personable. You know, he's a guy that communicates easy. He'll chirp you. He'll be honest with you. He kind of has got a mixed bag of different ways he kind of does things, but I like his approach to the game. You know, it's one of those things where we've obviously had a great season. It hasn't really been too much to dwell on, but at the same time, it's easy to get complacent, and he's trying his best to keep us with our minds focused.
You mentioned, you know, you've always loved the city, loved the fans. Were there times that it was tough, just, you know, whether it's being out, around, or even us in the media, or, you know, were there times that got to you?
I mean, not necessarily that I didn't think. You know, I think that after, you know, it got public, obviously, I think I knew it was coming. But at the same time, from media, fans, whatever, but anytime I walk around Boston, it's always positive stuff. You know, anytime I'm actually in person or going to somewhere in the North End, and they love us here. It's one of those things where even when that was going on, there was only support. So, you know, just from random people. So it was kind of one of those things where I found it was interesting. You can go on Twitter, you can go and see everything you want that's not good, but then you go outside and go to dinner or something like that, and someone recognizes you and says good job. You know, it's kind of weird, at least last year, for me to kind of see both sides of it. But obviously there's some tough times. Getting booed at home was not necessarily a bright spot either. I've been booed in Toronto and booed in Boston, but like I said, I was expecting a reaction. I knew it wasn't going to be a good one.
All right, I usually like to end these with non-hockey questions, but this one is actually a little hockey related. So,
what you got?
One of the big stories in sports this week has been trash talk. Women's basketball national championship game. There was some of it. You know, when does it cross the line to disrespect? You're on a line with one of consistently voted as the best trash talker and the worst trash talker.
Yeah,
he wins both.
Yeah.
In your mind, what place does trash talk have in hockey, and can it cross the line?
I think anything can cross the line. I think it depends on the certain person or the, you know, or parameters it's around. But you know, usually when it gets pretty intense, it's pretty much just death threats. So I don't really know what beats that. You know what I mean? But I think it's definitely got a place in the game. You know, there's lots of talk about fighting and how fighting's coming in the game. I haven't fought in a couple of years, but I think you need that, or else guys run around with superstars and take liberties on guys. But at the same time, trash talk kind of gives you a personal edge. You know, I think Marshy's worse, or voted the worst, because he's annoying. You know, he's annoying in the sense that some guys really, like, he's not even a good chirper, but he's still doing that to kind of get himself in the game. And I think it's fun. I think it's fun going to those scrums. I always try to get a listen on what he's saying, and usually I'm coming in there to try to protect. But he's one of those things where I think, yeah, the national championship one game's interesting though. I don't know how I feel about that, because I look at that and I go, that's gamesmanship. That's fair. What she did, the first girl and the second girl, I get both of them. You know, if you can give it, you got to be able to take it. But at the same time, you know, it's at the end of the game. It's at the end of the game of the national championship, so that's got to hurt. Yeah. So it's almost more, I don't know if that's more badass or if that's more the other way. So I'm kind of 50s on that, but I kind of was looking at the Twitter and people were just losing it. I'm like, oh God, that app is hilarious to me. But you know what, hey, she was in the game, and the girl who won, I don't know their name sadly, but the girl who won, hey, you can do whatever you want. You're just a national champion, you know? It's one of those things where if I won a Stanley Cup, I'd probably say some dumb things too.
They need a handshake line, right?
Yeah,
settle things down.
Yeah, they didn't even have a handshake line, did they? Or did they?
I don't really think.
I didn't watch the game.
They'll do like some like one-off handshakes and stuff.
That would be interesting, yeah, because if that happened, then the handshake line happened. That would be popcorn ready, you know. Then it'd be either like we're all good, or it'd be even more intense. So yeah, that's what I'd say on that.
All right, thanks a lot, Jake.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you to Jake DeBrusk for taking the time to talk to Scott today. It's always nice when we get these one-on-ones because you get an extended period of time. It's always more casual. It's not like, I don't know. And a lot of these guys are really easy to talk to. And I think DeBrusk, you can kind of see that he was able to be more free with some of those answers. In particular, the toughest subject for him to talk about that he's probably going to have to answer questions about, not just this year, but into the future, was the stuff about the trade request. And also, Scott, you snuck in a little bit of a question about the coaching change, and he kind of gave a little bit of he does a good job not to throw Cassidy under the bus, though we all know what the speculation is that, him and Cassidy maybe didn't get along so great. So what were some of the things that he said to you that maybe you didn't know before, or that just expanded on, some important things that we've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think, he's obviously talked before about like how important Bergeron and Marchand is, but I thought here, like saying that they redeemed his career, like that or pretty much redeemed his career, like that's, I think, even further than where he's gone in the past, talking about them and, how playing with them and them kind of like taking him under his wing. And, Bergeron's talked about how basically like they just laid out to DeBrusk, like, if you're playing on our line, here's what it's expected of you, not just during your shifts, but every day at the rink, in video sessions. And, it's pretty clear that DeBrusk took that to heart. And like he even said, if people are trying to help you and you don't listen, like it's stupid not to. So, and I think it probably helped a lot more coming from those two. I'm sure some of the things Bergeron and Marchand told him were probably pretty similar to some of the things Bruce Cassidy told him, but maybe wasn't delivered the right way or wasn't connecting the right way. Whereas when it comes from Bergeron and Marchand and they're your line mates, like I'm sure that makes much more of an impact than hearing it from a coach who maybe, doesn't really know exactly what you're going through every single day or what's going to work with you.
Yeah, that I would say that was something that stood out to me as well. Like, redeemed my career, that's not like a small thing to say. That is very significant. And it speaks to the respect that he has for them, but also that they have for him, and the belief they had for him that he could get back on track and that he wasn't going to be a detriment to the team. And another thing that he said was that he felt that even though Twitter was kind of nasty to him, when he was outside and people saw him, they were always very supportive. And he said that it was never a doubt that he wanted to return to Boston. So I think he's handled it as well as he possibly could have. He said he's been booed in Toronto and he's been booed in Boston. It's true. He did get booed here for a little bit. And still, once again, when I go out and people, find out that I'm a Bruins reporter, the first person they usually ask me about is Jake DeBrusk. How is he? Is he a drama queen? And I'm always like, no, he's not. Like, he pulled himself out of a place that wasn't easy to pull himself out of, and he had the help of his teammates. And I actually really admire how he's been able to get things back on track. And I thought he gave you a really good interview. Another thing he talked about was the injury. So, not being able to play for an extended period of time. You asked him when he knew he was hurt, and he kind of gave you that answer. Like, I was on so many pain meds that I wasn't really sure, but I knew when Krejci was faster than me that something was wrong. So yeah. I thought that was funny because they throw that back and forth at each other a lot.
Yeah, everyone gives Krejci a hard. They give Krejci a hard time about two things: his skating and not shooting. Pasternak especially always gives him a hard time about not shooting. So yeah, that was a pretty funny answer.
He said, "I didn't even need to get it X-rayed. I already knew." Because
which like that part, like I didn't, I didn't know like he knew it was that serious like already, because we knew like, okay, he ended up in a walking boot by the time he got press conference, and then you find out, and like I kind of just figured that, all right, that's one of those things where it's probably painful, but then they find out after it's a little more serious, and there is actually a crack in the bone there. But yeah, he said like he basically knew during the game, like it just wasn't getting better, and any hockey player, that feeling, like if you get hit with a shot and at first it feels really bad, and then you skate around a little bit and eventually it gets better, and you're gonna have a bruise, but you realize like, okay, like I'm all right, I'll get through this. And yeah, for him, it seems like it went the opposite way, where it was like he was waiting for that moment where it's like, all right, like it's gonna be fine, and it just never came. And then next thing you know, he's slower than Krejci.
Yeah, which apparently is, obviously he's kind of kidding, but also he knows he's faster than Krejci. So, yeah, the term he used was, it wasn't just a stinger, right? It's not something you just shake off. And I found out that my injury from yesterday to my foot is not just a stinger. But anyway, another key topic that you talked to him about was the playoffs, and kind of how the injury factors into how he's going to want to finish out the season. We talked about rest for some people. He kind of alluded to the fact that because of the injury, he feels like maintenance maybe would be the best way to put it, is important for him in this time of year.
Yeah, I think that the key word he said was consistency, because he feels like he had like a little bit of a wall and has been a little bit inconsistent, and and I asked like, is that a physical thing, and he kind of said no, like it's more mental. So I think that's kind of just the grind of the season type of thing kicking in. Especially for a team that doesn't have a ton to play for night to night. I think you've probably seen that with a few guys here and there, honestly, and sometimes even the whole team has kind of hit, a little bit of a skid. But yeah, so I think he's probably just looking to like, doesn't necessarily have to be, exploding for 3 goals in these last 5 games, but he just wants to feel like he's playing consistently, and that he doesn't get to the playoffs and like, have to flip a switch. Like he wants to have kind of some upward momentum already going.
And so I guess if you don't have any other thoughts about what DeBrusk said, which you're going to be putting up an article based on some of the things he talked about tomorrow. So look for that. Should be up right around the same time that this goes up. Is there anything else you expect for Toronto goaltending matchups? What Toronto's going to be putting out on the ice? Anything else you want to go over?
It sounds like Ryan O'Reilly is going to return for Toronto. He's been out injured. I think he broke his finger. But the reports from out of Toronto's practice on Wednesday is that he's back and he's playing Thursday in Boston. So, you might actually see these teams both at relatively close to full strength. And, it'll be interesting to see, like, are they going out? Are they both treating it like a big game, or are they, because Bruins are locked into first and Toronto's locked into second, are they, maybe taking it a little easy, leaving something in the tank, not quite showing the other everything that they have? So that'll be interesting, because I almost could see it being a game where like maybe it starts a little slow and there's a little bit of feeling out, but then something happens and kind of ramps up, and like by the midway point of the second period, it has a little bit of a playoff feel and there's some intensity to it. So we'll see. I think it's going to be an interesting game, though, to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and I mentioned this on the last podcast. The next 2 games, Thursday against Toronto and Saturday against New Jersey, are theoretically the harder of the last 5 matchups for the Bruins. They need 3 more wins in order to break that regular season win record. So, and then they finish out against Philadelphia, the Washington Capitals, and Montreal at Montreal, that last game of the season on the 13th, which hopefully I will be up in Montreal for, but we will see about that. Any other thoughts?
No, I don't think so.
Goaltending? No, nothing. Okay. So we will be recording again after the Toronto game on Thursday night. So look for that up on Friday morning. But I guess that wraps up this discussion. Thank you to Jake DeBrusk once again. And tune in again after Toronto.